Hi everyone, it's John Glynn. Today I'm looking at Photoshop Elements 20, but this actually relates to other versions of Photoshop as well. And this particular session I'm going to do is looking at just saving your photographs after you've worked on them. So I not necessarily need to work on them, but I will do a couple of things to start with. Or will do in a minute anyway. The first thing first. Okay, so you've opened up your photograph and it's in the main window here. What we need to do ideally is convert this from being a JPEG photograph into, I would advise, a TIFF file. What you have to do when you open up a photograph, you'll have a tab at the top here above your photograph, and it will have a code by your camera and JPEG. Most people will be working with JPEG. Okay, so I'm going to start from that basic principle that you've got a JPEG photograph. You can, in theory, work in layers in Photoshop without having to convert to anything else, but best practice is not to work on JPEG photographs. Okay, and it's easier to save it, in my view, at this stage as an alternative file than to try and do it all later on when you're working on the photograph. So my advice is you open your photograph as we have. We would then go to File, which is in the top left hand corner of the Photoshop Elements working area. Click on File and Save As. So we're going to Save As, and now we're into another window. Now it will, or it ought to, go back to the same folder that your picture came from. So in my case I've got a thing called Scotland's Places. As you can see, this is the Forth Rail Bridge. So I just have a set of photographs in there. It can be within the folders, so you could have a folder within a folder and it can go back there as well. You have to make sure you know where it's going, okay, but it should automatically go back to the same folder that your picture came from. It will have JPEG, and under here it says Save As Type. We're going to change that and we're going to put it as a TIFF file. Now I actually also, so that's just under the listing here, there's a whole load of different file types. TIFF is the very bottom one. Okay, it's in alphabetical order. I'd also give it a name, and the reason I do that is because I then know I'm working on it. I don't change every photograph I'm going to actually keep. I'm going to name the ones I would use regularly. So in this case I might call that Forth Road Bridge, and if I have more than one I'm working on, I may give them numbers: Forth Road Bridge 1, Forth Road Bridge 2, etc. And then I can say save. So at the moment it's going to be a TIFF file in the same folder that the original came from. Say save, and it will ask me, do I want to compress this full file at all? No, I don't. It's going to have no compression, so the default settings are correct. If you have I'm using a PC, so it's IBM PC. It's already logged in because I have a PC version of the software, so it knows what I'm using. If you've got Macintosh, it will have Macintosh ticked. It doesn't really matter which anyway, because they will open on any software effectively, but you're going to stay with IBM PC if you've got a PC. So you're going to say OK, and my name for the photograph now changes to Forth Road Bridge .tiff file at the top in the file, in the little tab at the top. So I know I've changed it. And now I'd work on my photograph. So if I do anything on my picture, ideally I would work in layers. So I wouldn't just have one picture with a background. I'd do as much as I possibly can in layers. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to do layer, and let's get rid of a load of rubbish that pops up. I'm going to go to say, for instance, I'll do hue and saturation, and just change the hue and change the saturation. It's a little bit over the top, but there's a hue and saturation layer, and you could also do another layer over the top of that one or underneath it, whatever. Let's do A levels one for what it's worth, and I'll make it all a bit brighter and change the mid-tones, things like that. Play around. So you've just got several layers. This little box here I can switch off, don't really need. And so I've got my layers, I've done something to my picture, and I might think, oh, well actually I want to keep that version. I can't keep this version as a JPEG with layers. Okay, if you have layers in your picture, you have to keep it either as a TIFF or as a Photoshop's own document system. So if you're going to save this, you could go into File and you could do Save, because if you say Save, it will come up with a window not dissimilar to what we had before, and I say OK. It will then say including layers will increase file size. That means these layers on the right hand side will make the file size bigger, maybe not significantly bigger, but a little bit bigger, and the more layers you have and the more you've done, the bigger the file size will get. Well, you're going to say OK, and you would then find that when you close this window down, if I were to close this picture down, when I reopen it the next day, it will have the layers on the right hand side just as they are right now. I can continue working on the picture, I can go back to the picture and double click it with the left mouse key, and I can change it yet again. So I can keep on changing this as often as I like. Okay, and I can delete the layers. So I can continue working on the photograph for as much as I actually wish to do, and undo and redo layers. So you're going to keep this as a TIFF file with layers. You can also keep it, if I go into File and Save As, you can also keep the same picture, if you wish to, as a Photoshop's own document system, a PSD file. Now the PSD file will open up in Photoshop, but it won't open up in Windows or anything like that. There are some software programs you can read it, but you do need a program that can read Photoshop's own document system. It is a slightly compressed system, so therefore it does reduce, in theory it reduces the picture quality ever so slightly, as opposed to a TIFF, which is a bigger file size. But in the old days we had no choice, it was only the PSD system, and it's more than ample. But TIFF is probably more adaptable with modern computer systems, so we would normally save it as a TIFF. Okay. If I want to print this picture, I can at home. This picture is perfectly suitable for printing as it is on my own inkjet printer, and as long as I can see the layers, I can print them out. If I close the layers down with the little magic eye on the left hand side of the layer, each layer, if you go to the layers panel on the right hand side and you click on a layer, you'll find there's a little magic eye. If you turn it on and off, if it's off, it won't print. Okay, so on your own inkjet printer it won't print, but if it's on, it will print. So what you see is what you get. Okay, that's the basic principle. So you can see how I can turn them on and off, and you can have just the original picture if you wanted to. Okay, if I'm going to send this picture by email, or I'm going to send this picture off to be printed commercially, or I'm going to put it onto a memory stick to be printed commercially, so I'm going to take it to a shop to be printed, they can't print with layers. Okay, so we have to flatten it. So to flatten it so that I don't have layers, I would go to Layer, and the bottom option is Flatten Image. So I'd flatten the image. When I flatten the image, it's gone. It's down to one picture, just like it would be if it's a solid print. Okay, so I'll just undo that again. I'll go through that again. So I've got my layers, and if I want to save this picture for printing commercially or to send it by email, I would need to flatten the layers. So I would then go up to Layer, in the Layers option is in the top toolbar, and I would go to the word Flatten, and I'd flatten the image. Now I've only got one layer, and this version I would save as a JPEG. So I'd go to File and save this, Save As JPEG. So go back to the same location that the original picture came from. It would have the same name as the original picture, but the file type, Save As Type, would be changed from being a TIFF to JPEG. And if I click on the JPEG option, and then you'll see I've got lots of other JPEGs, you'll see any other pictures opening up within the same folder with that JPEG, you say Save, and it will give you choices as to the quality that you're saving the JPEG as. Now the whole point of JPEG is it compresses the file size. So this picture without JPEG as a TIFF file at the very bottom of my picture area here, underneath my picture, has got 57 megabytes. But when I compress it as a JPEG, it comes down to 10.9 megabytes. If that's too big for sending by email, for instance, you can reduce the picture quality. You've got medium, high, maximum. I could do the high, it'll come to 2.3 megabytes. Medium will be 1.3 megabytes, and you can go down to low. Now if you go very, very low, like 1 megabyte, the quality when it reinvents the data might be so low that it's unusable. So generally speaking, we want it to be as high as we can. So ideally, you've got a little slider here. You can do it incrementally from 12, which is the highest quality, to 10, eventually 9, 10, and so on. As you go down with the slider, your file size will become smaller. It will always open up to 57 megabytes because that's what it is. That's the actual document size. So even if it's at 2.3 megabytes, it will open up to 57 megabytes. But in the process of doing this conversion, it loses a lot of detail, and therefore the quality could be undermined of your original photograph. So we really want to reduce it as little as possible. So if I can save it and keep it as 10.9 megabyte file size, I would do. I would then say OK. You can ignore the rest of this. This is all unimportant. You just say OK, and I now have the Fourth Road Bridge JPEG picture at the top, and this is the picture I would email to people or send commercially. I would always keep a version of the photograph as a TIFF file as well, with layers. So there's the Fourth Road Bridge layers one, and there's the Fourth Road Bridge JPEG one, side by side in the folder, because they've both got the same name in alphabetical order. So if they haven't had a name, you can see that they're taken from different cameras. They've got alphabetical order: Carlton Hill, Edinburgh Castle. These are numbered, so it's 1 and 2. These are unnumbered, so it's alphabetical. So you can sort of work out how you're going to do your file management. You can work out whether you're going to keep a TIFF file. If I drag the TIFF file in, I'll do that now, you'll notice that the TIFF file opens up, and on the right hand side in the layers panel I have all the layers that I had originally, and the JPEG is just the flattened version. Okay, so have a go at saving your pictures and understand the process. The best thing to do is, if you've got a JPEG, before you work on your picture, remember you're going to convert this to a TIFF file through File, Save As, and you're going to save it as a TIFF. It's up to you whether you name it or not, but I'd advise giving it a name so you can find it easily again at a later date. You would work in layers if at all possible, and you'd save those as a TIFF file with layers, and then you'd only convert to JPEG if you're going to send them as an email, or you're going to get it printed commercially, anything like that. Then you'd have to convert it to a JPEG. You can obviously keep it as a JPEG as well if you wish, but you would never delete the TIFF with layers, because you'd want to come back at a later date possibly and continue working on the photograph. Okay, so it's just the process of understanding the different file types, in particular JPEG and TIFF. Okay, hopefully that helps a little bit in understanding the file types that we have, and just practice saving your photographs to a folder. Okay, thank you very much for watching.